Do you think life is simpler as time evolves? For some, it can be more complicated when facing issues about health, estate plans, probate, long-term care, and more. That's why Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell hosts ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of ElderTalk. With us this week is, I think, Jill, this has to be maybe the most popular guest that we've had. I know I say this about a number of guests who return periodically, but I have to tell you that Todd Oetken is without question the person who's gotten the most favorable comments,
Yes.
follow-up questions from us,
Hands down. Hands down.
So, Todd, we are grateful that you have time to visit with us today and to continue this conversation about how do people have financial security and how do people do financial planning in this pandemic environment.
Our new normal, unfortunately.
I hate to think of that. But,
I know.
and, we should also add this, Todd. Todd is a financial advisor, certified financial planner with R.W. Baird. This is a huge company. Now, I didn't know that much about Baird. Jill, did you?
Not until I met Todd.
Yeah, and the people we have on this show, it's not because there's somebody that we promote. We have no financial relationship with the people we do business with, et cetera, and the people we talk about in this show. So one thing that we're proud about this show is that we can have on people and think purely about how beneficial they'll be to our audience, and without regard to having to be sponsors or et cetera.
Right.
And
just keeping people informed.
Yeah, and it allows us to have the best and to be unbiased in selecting them. So Todd came to our attention some time ago, and I came to know him. In fact, he works out of Louisville. I came to know him, in fact, because he originally represented an aunt and uncle of mine, both of whom are deceased now. But Baird, tell us a little bit about Todd R.W. Baird. It's a huge company.
It is. At first, I just want to comment on the nice introduction you always give me. It reminds me of my Aunt Nancy. She has 22 nieces and nephews, and every one of them, she says, "You are my favorite niece and nephew." So, but I do feel appreciated here, that's for sure.
Aunt Nancy, I love it.
That's right.
Well, Aunt Jill does like you, I can tell you.
Yes, I do. I made you some cookies as well. Too bad you're not here.
Thank you.
So tell us about Baird.
R.W. Baird is an international company. And, I started with Hilliard Lyons, which was a regional firm here in Louisville.
A storied company. I mean, they had a great reputation. To be honest with you, I hated to see that name disappear.
I did too. It was a 150-year-old company here in Louisville, based here in Louisville. But, this R.W. Baird who bought us or purchased us is an employee-owned company. We have offices all over the world. It tripled the size of what our company would have been. And the best part about it is the leadership is exactly the way that Hilliard Lyons leadership was. They're very personable. If you need something, you can get the president of the firm on the phone, and they'll talk to you. They'll talk to your clients. And it just has been fantastic.
And that doesn't always happen when another company takes over.
No, it usually doesn't happen.
No,
and they've done exactly what they said. I mean, when they bought us, they pretty much said, you can keep your own investment philosophies, the way you do things, the way you treat your clients, and mainly because it's a very collegial atmosphere like Hilliard was, and everybody does what's right for the client. And that's the way it works. So it's been fantastic transition.
Very good. I think a good place to start, especially to roll from that topic into some specifics about planning, is distinguish a financial planner from, say, a stockbroker or an investment advisor, those who work for brokerage firms like Payne Weber, et cetera, whose job it is simply to I don't want to demean their position, to take orders of stock and securities purchases. I know they do more than that, but distinguish that from a financial planner.
That's a great question. So a financial planner has gone that extra mile to actually do studying in the financial planning field. And the reason I got into it is exactly with what you're kind of alluding to, Joe, is when I first started and they sent me to New York for training, they just kept saying, sell this, sell this, sell this. And I thought, I know a lot of people because I had a career before this. I said, I better know why they're telling me to sell this if I'm going to sell it to somebody who already trusts me. And that's when I started studying for the CFP designation, which is a very hard course. I mean,
I understand it is.
yeah, it's huge. And then, you have to take this after you take it. That's about 7 courses you have to take. And then you take an exam, and it's a 2-day exam, and it is very comprehensive. So
It's similar to the CPA exam.
very much so, yes.
How long does it take to get through those 7 courses? Are we talking years?
Yeah, it was about a year and a half,
Okay.
I think, for me.
I think standard, it's like a 2-year program, and often people are doing this in addition to their 4-year college degree. And people should also know that these 7 areas that you're tested on to be a certified financial planner relate to the 7 primary areas that most individuals, almost all individuals, deal with to some extent in their financial planning. It covers insurance, it covers retirement plans, investments. I mean, all those financial areas that you would normally look to an individual expert for each of those things. You go to an insurance agent, maybe regarding investments, you'd go to a broker. The problem with that is, and I would argue that probably 80% of the people listening to us now do this, is that you're relying for advice as to each of those specific areas from someone who is a salesman. Now, I don't want to be hard on insurance guys. I mean, I know they have to make a living, and I've known some who are very smart, of course. So I don't want to offend any of the listeners who sell insurance, but the operative word here is sell, and
Right.
and the same thing with stockbrokers. I know that there are brokers who understand securities and whatnot to some extent. If you are getting your advice from them, then you should know that your relationship is such that they're on the opposite side of the table. They're not sitting on the same side of the table as you.
That's a good way of putting it.
And that's the difference. That's the difference between your relationship with your financial planner. And people who've listened to the show know, and I've had a couple other CFPs on over the past 4 or 5 years, Todd, and about all of them I said I'm a big fan of this certification for the reasons I just gave. It's really, for the average person, it's the only place they can go and hope to get objective advice, without someone whose career and whose income depends upon their ability to sell you things.
And it also, Jill and Joe, because you have this wealth of knowledge that goes beyond just the investment portion of it, while you're giving advice to people, you're looking at other things in their life. So it might change the advice you would give for a specific investment because you know all the other things about it. And let me give you one example. It just happened today. A client called us and very sadly was saying his wife has terminal cancer and doesn't have very much longer to live.
Oh.
Well, her account is in her individual name, and it's worth about $1 million, and the cost basis is about $500,000. So even though it sounds hard, but one of the thoughts would be transfer that account into the husband's name, and then when she passes away, you get the step up in basis, and he would save the tax on anything that he sold in that account, which again is a hard conversation to have, but it's an excellent strategy.
But it's a
going forward.
necessary conversation.
It is.
Yeah, and which another one of those 7 areas that CFPs are certified or tested for is taxes, and like the suggestion you just made, there's a tax dimension to all financial planning, almost all financial planning. There's some sort of consideration relating to taxes, and something tells me with our incoming president that taxes are going to become more and more a driving consideration in financial planning. Would you agree with that?
Well, no matter what the president, I think eventually that's going to happen.
Yeah, because there's so much deficit spending.
Yes.
Yeah, and more to come.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good transition. We have all these people who will be listening to us, and I know their thoughts. They're people who are probably 80% of our audience is over age 65, and they have 2 concerns, and I think in this order. though not always in this order. One is health, meaning how do I avoid the virus? And number two is how do I survive financially in this crazy, crazy economy that seems to veer from day to day, either wildly exuberant or in the throes of an oncoming depression. So it's like a roller coaster that the economy's been on. And I think that people are dominated by these twin concerns. And for some, I think probably the financial concerns outweigh the health concerns. So that's part of what's driving our agenda on this show for the past 6 months, is it seems like we either have someone on to talk about issues relating to health, or we have somebody on to talk about issues relating to financial planning, with a focus, of course, on people who are over 65 and having to deal with this unpredictable, chaotic 2020.
And I think this pandemic, and Todd, tell me if you agree with me, it really has served as a wake-up call for planning for the unexpected and getting your financial affairs in order.
I think for sure.
Let me put this question to you. Here we are coming near the end of the year. People are wondering, gee, what can I expect next year? And tell me what you're telling your older clients especially. And I know that you have a lot of clients who are probably over 70 even.
Number one, and you touched on this at the very beginning, Joe, the most important asset that you have, no matter what age, is your health. So the first advice we give all of our clients is focus on that. If you're not eating right, begin to eat right. If you smoke, quit smoking. If you're not exercising, you got to do that. Not only does that prolong your life in many aspects, but it also helps you if you get the virus. My partner and I both had the virus about a month ago, but because we were healthy, it was very minimal.
Really? I didn't know you had
I
this.
didn't either.
I did. Yeah. So I had, and the only reason I even got tested was because I didn't have a sense of smell or taste. And I had like what I thought would be a head cold. Normally around this time of year, I get the same exact thing. But I'd visit so many older clients, I thought, I better get tested. And when I did, it came back positive. And my girlfriend, Sheila, did the same thing. Since I came back positive, she got tested. She was positive also. Mine lasted about 4 days, and it was mainly congestion, I guess, and not a lot of, breathing issues, but a little bit. But I was never tired, never had a fever, anything like that. Now, Sheila had, she had a small headache. She had really fatigue, and her body ached. Neither one of us ever had a fever, though. Hers lasted a little bit longer. She got retested about the same time I got retested. Mine was negative. Hers was positive. And then she went another 3 days and then got tested, and hers was negative. So hers lasted maybe 8 days. Mine, really bad symptoms, were maybe 3 days. But I really think that a lot of what helped us, we worked out every single day during that. Some people can't do this, but we worked out every single day during that time, and it allowed our head to get clearer, just because when you're walking, you can get rid of a lot of that congestion.
What kind of exercises were you doing? Obviously, you weren't in a public gym.
Oh, no. I have a gym in my garage. So we and again, once you get tested positive, the health department gives you a call. It's a 30-minute interview.
Wow.
They want to know everywhere you went, if you were in large gatherings. They want to know about your weight, what kind of things you eat. I guess they're trying to get as much information as they can to figure out if there's some similarities in different things.
What was your reaction when you tested positive?
It was a little bit of a fear and relief at the same time.
I can see that.
Because, my symptoms were not that great. I felt comfortable. I kept thinking the other shoe was going to fall, and it never did. But after the fact now, actually, it feels pretty good knowing that I had it. I survived, because if you listen to what the news is saying, everybody's dying. And,
yeah,
if you get it, I mean, it's a death sentence. And it's really not. 99% of the people who get it have more what I had than the really serious things. It doesn't make it any easier for the ones that, react differently, but the majority of people aren't going to have it was less for me intrinsic than the flu.
But now you have an immunity, right?
Well, that's a good question. Now, now this sounds selfish, but I actually gave blood yesterday because they now test for the antibody and they tell you if you have it or not. So I should have gave blood because I need to be giving blood, but that was my main purpose.
Well, I'm
So
sure
we'll
you have
see.
antibodies. You got to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you've dealt with this personally, and you've had numerous patients who've dealt with this issue. So tell me
Yeah.
what your advice to them is for 2021.
All right. So number one is the health. Keep your health up, because that if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how much money you have.
True.
It's not going to be any good to you. Secondly, I think this pandemic has taught everyone that your family is very important, and there's so many things you can do together as a family that maybe work isn't everything that you always thought it was. So spend more time with your family. I think that's taught me that, and it's been a great reminder for me that being in the office really doesn't do that much for you. I mean, you got to support them, but other than that, be present in your life. Money wise, though, it tells you that you got to have an emergency fund. You got to build that cash fund up where if you do lose your job, if a hot water heater goes out, all these little things that might come up. If there's a pandemic and you can't go to work, you'll have this stock of cash to pay those bills for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever you feel comfortable with, until things pick back up and you can find something else to do. The other thing it has taught me, and it teaches my clients, just because you're in one industry doesn't mean that skill set can't pass to another industry.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right. And my family has hotels. Well, a lot of the employees in the hotels, I have one in particular I've been trying to work with, a mentor. We lost a lot of employees because there's no one staying in hotels. So many of those people think, oh my God, if I can't work in a hotel, where am I going to work? But if you're serving other people, that skill set can pass to Amazon, going working somewhere else, being a driver. There's all kinds of other jobs you can do besides the one that you think that is the only job you'll ever do.
And I think people need to really hear that, because I know that there are people who are sitting and drawing the unemployment, which there's going to be a new round and an extension, I'm sure, next year, if not sooner. I think often for these people, it might make sense to transition.
Reinvent yourself.
Yeah. There's such opportunity in America. Sometimes it helps to have. It's almost as if Americans need an immigrant's mentality.
Yeah.
The mentality that their great-great-great-grandfather may have had. Is that they come to America and they see this land of opportunity.
Right.
And Americans often get up in the morning and have long forgot that. And if they're in an industry where things are going very poorly, then they figure that they need to sit and wait for that industry to improve. And in some cases that may be the case, but as you're suggesting, there's so much opportunity. There are actually segments of the economy that are booming right now.
Yeah, and I think that's so important that you have to remember to think outside of the box.
So do you have clients though who have retired and now are thinking, whoops, maybe I shouldn't have quit so soon. Maybe I need to go and do something else for a while to earn money, perhaps in a different career?
Yeah, several. And not more so, I get more, not because they need the money, but more because they have struggled with finding that purpose. They get up in the morning. If you have been at a job for so long, when you go in, a lot of the time that becomes your identity, and people respect you for whatever that position was. And when you walk in the door, people say, hey, Todd, how you been doing?
That
You have that
camaraderie,
camaraderie,
yeah.
right? And then when you go home and now you're retired, which is a fantastic thing to do, but you have to replace that somehow or other. Now, some people do it very easily. They might like fishing or camping or flying airplanes, whatever it might be. But if they don't have that, and a lot of executives don't have that, because work was their life, they got to recreate themselves. And that's the ones I'm finding that have retired. They're saying, I need to do something else. And they'll be doing working at Lowe's or someplace like that where they don't have to go to work, but it gives them that purpose to get up in the
Or
morning.
even volunteer opportunities. I know of someone that retired and started volunteering at a couple of animal shelters.
Yeah, I think that's big. The problem right now is you can't do those things.
Well, that's true.
Well, somebody
And
has to
that's
be
another
doing.
big problem that we've had with several of our clients, especially the older ones. They're stuck inside. They're afraid to go out.
Oh yeah, if you're
And
older, especially.
the depression is horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you're older, it's so much worse because you can't simply decide that, gee, I want to go do this and go do it. If you're 30 years old, even in this economy, to some extent, you can do it unless it's one of those industries that has just crashed. And but I get it. If you're older, the message is just stay home. At least during the height of this latest outbreak, and now we're looking at, what did I read? Over 150,000 people a day now in the U.S. When we were all the way down in the high 30s. What
That's
was it?
alarming, yeah.
Yeah, it was a high 30s per day of new diagnoses in the United States as recently as, 8 weeks ago or so?
Uh-huh.
And it seemed on a downward trend. And then all of a sudden, we spike for reasons I still don't fully understand, and maybe no one does. But
A lot of it may be just more people are getting tested.
Maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, I was tested twice. My girlfriend was tested 3 times. We had another friend who was on dialysis, and they wouldn't let him back in that specific dialysis center until he had 2 negatives in a row. He was tested 8 times and never got that 2 negatives in a row, but he had no symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they count that.
Yeah, and I think maybe some of the fear of this virus may subside when you have more people being tested and people start to know cases such as yours and your girlfriend, where people will have 5 or 6 people they know who, they had it and none of them had any problems. Because statistically we know that unless you're very old, the probability of your having severe symptoms that require hospitalization is less than 1%.
Yeah.
And I think that people, though, haven't seen that because generally there wasn't a lot of people who are getting diagnosed just routinely, meaning checked with or without symptoms. And so only people that were going into the hospital, were being diagnosed as having it. They show up at the hospital, they're very sick, and they're diagnosed. So the perception that the public has is, oh my gosh, a diagnosis is like a cancer malignancy.
Yeah, death sentence. And I have to say, the people that I have come across that had it, they described symptoms just like Todd. Never having a fever, loss of the sense of taste and smell, congestion, but nothing to where they felt, that it was, they were miserable.
Yeah, same here. The acquaintances that my wife and I have had, and several through our church, have gone through this, and we don't know anybody who's had any hospitalization due to the virus.
Now, did they recommend, Todd, that you take cough syrup or anything like that?
No, the health department, basically they were just saying, hey, you can't do this. So it was 10 days. You had to quarantine in your home for 10 days after your symptoms stopped. My doctor, actually, who is a personal friend, did give me the hydrochloroquine?
Yeah, hydrochloroquine.
Just because I asked him to. I took it, and I kind of got mine over sooner than what Sheila did. Sheila didn't take it. Hers lasted a little bit longer, but both of our symptoms were about the same with or without it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard about hydrochloroquine, I think is how you pronounce it, is that it's most helpful for somebody who's already been diagnosed, and it supposedly improves or accelerates the recovery. I think that right now, the methods that are being followed between the north and southern states are interesting. And I want to get back to talking about some finances here, but this topic is just fascinating to me, the way in which different countries and even different continents have dealt with this as social policy. Like you're being followed, but it's a relatively light touch that the U.S. has. Now, they're going to CDC will contact you, or their corresponding state organization will contact you and ask the questions that you described, and et cetera. And contrast that to the Chinese approach, which some guys will just show up with some 2x6s and nail them in your front door, and so you're not going anywhere after your diagnosis for so long, and China's just used these heavy police tactics. One could argue has worked. In the United States, we're not prepared to do that, and we're prepared to recognize people's freedom. At least so far, that's been the case. Now, I think if things did get substantially worse, I think you would see policies, maybe not the ones exactly followed in China, but I do think
I hope not.
Yes, same. But I do think that as this gets worse, more coercive tactics will be tolerated, even encouraged by segments of the society, and that's what has produced this great divide in America right now. Is what is the proper role of government under circumstances like this? And of course, there are civil libertarians, who believe that despite the course of this disease, there are certain rights that can't be transgressed, and then others who are perfectly willing to submit to whatever the government deems necessary.
I have to admit, I had a completely different outlook when I had it, because I was very more in tune of not being around anybody. Even though I don't know if I would have been contagious or not, but it certainly makes you very alert of trying to stay away, I thought. And so for those 2 weeks, it was pretty much in the house, maybe walk around a little bit outside, but where no one was even close to you. And that was really it.
And I think most people do have that mindset when they're diagnosed.
Yeah, you don't need a phone call from an authority to tell you to be at home. Most people, I think, do not want to spread the virus, so they're willing to isolate themselves.
I mean, we do hear of cases where someone has tested positive and they've gone out in public, but I think that's very rare. I think those are isolated cases.
Yeah.
I agree.
So then let's focus more on the dollars. So whenever people are thinking then about how they're going to invest next year, not that you have a crystal ball, but let's look at the factors that we know are going to be important. We have a president that's coming into office in January who we can be pretty confident, though, as you point out, I think you were suggesting a while ago, is that either president, whether it had been Trump or Biden, would have been spending more money, doing deficit spending, et cetera. And I think that's true. I think that either president would have done that. But I think some say that the Biden administration will do more of that, and that you can expect that there will be money poured out of both the Fed as well as the federal government through deficit spending. And what implications do you think that will have for 2021? Are you among those who believe that, in the short term, when you print a lot of money, you're going to see the market go up, but ultimately there's going to be this inflation that accompanies it? Is that your view?
Yeah. So, it's very subjective as far as you can get anybody's opinion. They're all going to be a little bit different. They can be in the same daggone industry. It's my opinion. Again, I'm a half full type person. Is that number one, you can't time the market. I had a friend who got out of the market right before the election thinking the world's going to end because he watches too much TV and this Armageddon was going to happen no matter who won the election.
Yeah, war in the streets.
Exactly. And that didn't happen so far. But once you get out of the market and it's sitting there in cash, you're earning 0% on it. So as you spend it, it's not going to last you near as long because you have no return and you don't know when to get back in. And if you miss those first 3 or 4 up days, you kind of missed the recovery. So if you get worried, that's the discussion with your financial planner. And the discussion is, hey, I don't have a real high risk tolerance, then you wouldn't have as much in the stock market. You'd have more in cash or in short-term bonds. So maybe it's a 60-40 mix. That way you still have some growth, but then you have that security for you. So that's a conversation with your financial advisor. Me personally I believe that since the interest rates, I know that they're going to have to keep it low for several years, you would think. And the fact that to keep this economy kind of rolling, there's no way you can get any type of return in bonds. I mean, they're just not paying anything. So if you can get into some really good companies in the market that are paying a decent dividend of 2 to 3 or 4%, that's probably a better choice, but still have that emergency fund where you can go to that if you need the money and let the market keep going. So I'm a big believer of good companies are going to be around forever, no matter who is the president, who's in the House, who's in the Senate. That's not going to change. And that's really where the most of the growth is going to be. As you get older, you don't want all your money in the market, because if you need to live on it and you have to sell some assets in order to support your lifestyle and it's down, that means you took a 20 or 30% haircut on that asset. But if you have that good emergency fund there, then you can kind of use that until it comes back. The other thing I might say, if you're 30 years old and you've lost your job, what you do, you cut back on all those things that you think you had to have. Cable is not a necessity. I was looking at some of the things that I did. A gym membership was not a necessity. So many of these things are not necessities. And I'll bet you so many people realize that during this pandemic, because they hadn't been able to go out, and their credit card bills have got to be less unless they were on that home shopping network or Amazon.
Yeah, I think it's called Amazon now.
Yeah.
There you go. You're right. That was a little dated, wasn't it, Joe? That's right. Throw me under the bus. I don't mind.
Hey, occasionally you and I'll show how old we are, but
So I think, though, and same thing in retirement. If for some reason something happens to the economy, then you cut back on those things that maybe you were going to do, and you can kind of wait, just as if you were working. The other thing that I really focus on is, and this kind of goes against what I just said, is in your from 65 to 75 is the years, if you want to do something, do it. Because after 75, you never know. One fall changes everything, and it changes the bucket list for both husband and wife.
yeah. We had a guest on not long ago, and you may have heard this phrase before. It wasn't original. It's the first time I'd ever heard it.
Oh.
He said that people, when they retire, go through 3 phases. It's go, slow go, and no go.
Yeah, I love that.
And his point was similar to yours, is that if there's something that you've really been putting off and thinking about, yearning for during those many years of working, and you plan to do with your wife or husband, do it. As you were saying, do it while you can, because there are no guarantees that if you wait 5 years that you're going to be able to do it. And that does, may put a little tension on the financial plan, at least if you're, maximizing safety. If you're saying, I want to be extremely confident that all my ducks are in a row financially, it might be that you have to, yield a little bit on that confidence level in order to fulfill those dreams, at least in a crazy year like this year. But do you not have people, though, before they retire, actually create funds for some of these particular things so that the money's already there, it's already committed to this purpose?
Well, definitely. Mainly in HSA. I mean, I know that's not for a fun thing, but that's certainly for your medical expenses as you get older, and it's all tax deductible. So that's a great way to save for that.
Explain that.
So the HSA, and again, you have to have a high deductible plan, and you have to have earned income to be able to contribute to it. But every dollar that you put into that, it comes directly off your adjusted or your gross income, so you never have to pay taxes on it, and it continues to roll over. So a lot of people who are trying to save for that later on down the road will actually put that money in there. You can invest it in securities, and it continues to grow. And at age 65, you actually can use it like an IRA even. So it's a great way to kind of protect yourself for, increasing medical expenses later on in life.
Todd, with all this talk about another possible shutdown of the economy, 4 to 6 weeks, that can't be good.
No, but I would think that if that happens, people are kind of already somewhat immune to that. They've already gone through it once. People have seen that they can work from home still. I think it goes back to hurting those few industries we've talked about before, the entertainment industry, the hotel business, the airlines. But the other industries are still, going on full force, and most of those people are still working from home anyway.
Right, but think about restaurants. beauty
I know.
salons.
Retail
know.
stores.
Re-
Yeah,
It's
the brick and
horrible.
mortar stores.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know if that's the right thing to do, but I do know that if people aren't working, there are other health issues that are coming about too, besides worrying about this virus. So I guess you have to kind of pick and choose. I'm not smart enough to make those decisions. I'm glad it's not something I have to do.
So how do you meet with your clients? Do you do it by Zoom now?
Yeah, most of mine we meet in person still, but we do quite a few Zoom calls also. But a lot of them, one that now we'll meet on their back patio or we'll go outside to a restaurant. Uh, some are a little more cautious than others. But many of my older clients, I pay their bills for them, so I do have to see them, and we check on them to make sure they're okay.
Yeah, you should explain that relationship and that opportunity. And of course, you're in Louisville, and while I guess you could technically represent people, I'm sure you do in St. Louis. But mainly, I want people to understand what options exist, probably similar here, and that there actually are people who, if you have a certain amount to invest, that they invest those funds at less money than you would think you would pay, and then for amounts that would probably surprise most of our listeners, they can have someone who will help them take care of their rent, make payments for things for them. If those listening are perhaps becoming less capable of doing these things themselves, or some may be children of people who are becoming less and less capable of doing these things themselves, they need to know about this option because I don't think a lot of people get it. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's out there for people as they age and their care and investment?
Sure, that's a little niche that we fell into just by accident because we had a couple older clients in their 80s and 90s who really didn't have anybody else to help them, and so you know they were making bad choices. Paying people that they shouldn't be paying, and we found out about it, and so we kind of just started creating a way that we can sit down with them, make sure all their state documents are in line, make sure that we set up everything on auto pay, and then everything else comes through us. So we can review what they're spending, and we can kind of help them make sure that they're paying the right things. We kind of help them look for a place if they've gotten to the point where they can't stay in their home, which is a very tough decision, but it's something we work with them with and show them around the different maybe assisted living or skilled care and help them find the right one. And then we just check on them, once a week just to make sure they're doing. And if they can't find somebody another a big place for fraud is little home improvement things. I mean,
Oh,
gosh, if you get the
sure.
wrong person, they're in there. Next thing you
Oh,
know, they're spending $50,000 for replacing a thumbtack here and there. It's been really eye opening for us.
we've had some guests from Better Business Bureau and others who've talked about this fraud has been rife over the last 6 to 8 months. You have old people at home, they're scared,
Yeah.
they're vulnerable, and they're isolated. And so either by way of these phone calls, robocalls, or maybe even knocking doors. But it's scary to think some of the scams that have been perpetrated on older
Right.
people during this pandemic.
Yeah, and they probably welcomed those people at the
Yeah, they're
door because
lonely.
of the loneliness.
I know.
But Todd, it sounds like what you do. It sounds like you become an extended family member for these individuals that don't have other family members to look out for them.
Very much so. Or sometimes it's they have family in other states,
Right.
so they don't have anybody here that can help them, and we become that. And
So
we're able to do like the payment and things like that because we have a trust company, and the trust powers allow that. Most brokerage firms won't allow you to pay bills for people.
yeah, yeah. So, but now tell me, is this just for the ultra rich, this
No,
service?
not
Are
really.
all
I
your
mean,
clients ultra rich?
no, God, no. We're probably more sympathetic than what we actually should be. Is it a good business decision? It is for us because it lets us sleep at night. But if if clients have probably over $1 million, I would say is kind of one. But gosh, if we have somebody who's struggling and they have under that, we help them also. We don't turn anybody away, really.
And it's
Fair
a
point.
function. I mean, it would be a function too of your ability to charge them a little more. For example, there are some services, maybe not quite as robust as yours, quite frankly, but similar to yours, in St. Louis that are available through some trust companies. And many of those, kind of what you suggested, their lower threshold for the most part is around $1 million, which, let me hurry to add, there are a lot of people that have $1 million when they consider the value of all their assets, et cetera. So, but even less than that, where the bank that I'm thinking of a trust company that's really very user-friendly, it's a small company and operates in a very local way, similar to the way you guys do, although I don't think to the same extent. But what they do is I think they charge like 1.5% of the money that they manage as a fee, and if it's over $1 million or $1.5 million, then they can afford to provide some of these services you mentioned. But if somebody has less than $2 million, they can still go to the example I'm thinking of a bank, and I think it might have been was it Commerce Trust Department, Jill? I think it's Commerce. But they could go, but and Commerce would agree to do it if you had, say, between $500,000 and $1 million, but they would have to charge you more. So they may charge you 2%. But when you think about what you're getting accomplished for that amount of money and compare it to hiring someone.
Right.
Hiring someone, an accountant or bookkeeper to take care of your books for you and to do the miscellaneous other things. I mean, you could do that. That is an option. You could do the math and see which is better. But it's really nice to have all that rolled into one professional that you trust.
Yeah, a one-stop shop is the way I look at it.
Yeah, and so in your case, you would charge less as a percentage for managing and taking care of these people as the amount of money you're managing goes up, because then you're making part of your money through the investments, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and really you make more, because if you're charging less percent on a higher number, it's still more than, someone who has much less assets and you charge them a little bit more on the percentage.
Yeah. I don't
But it's
think
worth it.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize that option is out there. And again, not as a sales thing for you, but I mentioned earlier that the way you and I met, my uncle had apparently come to know you and had known your family, I think, in Louisville. So I knew he was getting frail. He was starting to make some bad decisions. And he had always managed everything for my aunt. And they weren't rich, but they're probably at that threshold we just mentioned, somewhere around $1 million, I'm guessing. My uncle had the wisdom to know that his ability to sort of invest as he had done at one time is just not there. And maybe it's never there as well as it might have been had he turned it over to a professional. But he took pride in, stock picking and whatnot. And for the most part, he did okay. He chose good traditional dividend paying companies. But over time, his ability to do that degenerated, and I was concerned about it, and my family was, and he had the wisdom to start seeking out somebody, and he ended up, I don't know how long you had known him, Todd, but he ended up, of course, using you. And that's how you and I met, and I became familiar with the services you provide, watching you do it with my aunt, who was lost. I mean, when my uncle died, she was a widow who had never managed anything. I mean, she had managed the household, but nothing financial.
That was very common of women of her generation.
Yeah, and it was both legal, business, real estate. I mean, all those things were things that she didn't touch. And so she was lost. And thankfully, when my uncle passed, you were already in the picture, and so you kind of took that up for her. So when I think of our audience and the opportunities, or the sort of challenges, I should say, that many of them face, they should know that there's an option like this out there, and that there are similar things in St. Louis. Again, in my opinion, it may not be as robust as what you guys do, but there are opportunities out there that people need to know about, especially when you have an aging parent and you live in another city. You may live 100, 200, 300 or more miles away, and it's just not possible for you to have the sort of participation that you would like to have.
And, too, I can see situations where some parents may not want their adult children handling.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know there's those type of dysfunctional families.
Well, and it's not just dysfunctional. I think my uncle would have been uncomfortable, maybe, with my handling the investments.
Why is that?
Well, he was very private about his investments.
Okay.
And no, he had complete confidence in me. It wasn't that. But, I was the kid nephew, right? So I think that it would have been hard for him to share his finances maybe fully with,
Right.
And his errors and other things that all of us make, mistakes and whatnot. He was a little bit prideful in a good way. I mean, he was proud. I'll use that word. He was proud. So
I'll tell you what, though, he sure was proud of you and your brother. My lordy, him and your aunt. My gosh, you would think they hung the moon. You would think that they were their own sons. The amount of love that they had for those two boys was so impressive to me.
Yeah, they didn't have any children, and I spoke at my aunt's funeral, and she incidentally was the cheerleader, but more than my uncle. I said that I lost at least 90% of my fan club the day she died. I mean, she was, I may have lost the entire membership, but I mean, I could do no wrong in her eyes. And so no, it's great to have a cheering section like that.
What a lovely memory.
Yeah. So
even for me,
yeah.
I mean, I got touched by it. It was just amazing. But what you're saying, Joe, is so true, and especially when they start slowing down a little bit mentally. And that's when the fraud comes in, and they can devastate some of these older people, and they do it with a good conscience. And I don't know how people do it, but they do it. And so that's really when you need somebody kind of being able to look over their shoulder a little bit and say, sure, that was a good investment, but you ought to think twice about this one. I have one client who gets, I would say, 18 inches of mail every single day from people, trying to get donations here and there, and they send her $2 bills, quarters, stamps. And she writes a lot of checks. So, we finally have negotiated with her to say, hey, maybe, pick a couple good ones, and all these other ones, you're kind of taking advantage of you.
Yeah. Once you get on a mailing list, once you have responded to some sort of offering or advertisement or circular, then that list is sold and resold and resold. So you suddenly start.
Yeah, everybody and their brother is trying to get a donation then.
Yeah.
I know.
So as we close here, and this conversation could go on and on. I mean, the pandemic and financial issues, et cetera. So why don't you close with 2 or 3 of the best tips that come to mind that you might give to a client who's over 65 and concerned right now? Can you think of like 3 items that you think would be really beneficial? I put you on the spot. I didn't give you a chance to think about this, but go ahead.
Go ahead. Sure. First one is your health. That's number one. Second one is don't overextend your credit. Don't run up that credit card if you can't afford to pay it off. That's huge, because you'll never get it down. Third, make sure you have that cash reserve that you're going to be able to use for these emergency situations if something happens. And fourth, invest your money and realize it's a long-term investment. You're going to weather these small storms. Don't get nervous. And once you start getting nervous and you're starting to react emotionally, talk to your professional financial advisor and let them answer those questions for you before you do something irrational.
Excellent. And let's go back to 3 for a minute. How do they calculate what their emergency fund should be?
In retirement, I always say between a year and 2 years of expenses, basic expenses, not the extraordinary ones, the trips here and there,
Right.
but your basic expenses.
Just everyday living, your bills.
Right.
And that money, that amount, which incidentally is a substantial amount of money, that should be in a separate place, a more conservative investment than where there others would be?
Right. That should just be in the bank. in cash. There's really no bonds that are going to pay you that much because, again, you need to be able to say, hey, I need it within 3 months or 2 months or 4 days, and I want to have that liquidity. So
yeah, and it's a
pretty much
good
need
time.
cash.
It's a good time to put it on the shelf because it's not as if you're giving up 10% rate of return in
No.
bonds or savings account or any other investment, and we don't have any substantial inflation. I mean, we can argue whether it's less than 2% or at 2%, but we all agree there's not a lot of inflation. So there's not much harm to putting it on the shelf, is there?
No, not at all.
Very useful suggestions. Todd?
Always a pleasure having you.
Yep.
I always enjoy it.
And we'll look forward to having you back again, as will our audience. Take care.
All righty. Have a great day, guys.
Hey, you too. This has been another episode of Elder Talk. Till next week, take care.
You've been listening to Elder Talk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future, with Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Listen again next Saturday for another edition of Elder Talk with TuckerAllen. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.